When buying a video game, do you go after the original release, or do you mind if it's the player's choice or greatest hits version? Hey Nintendo fans and collectors, Lithium here from my channel Nintendo Collecting. There are a lot of different variations out there. Not only is there player's choice or greatest hits, there's also something called for display only, which occasionally are released for some games, or they're even just in the store and they're collectible. And then there's also something called not for resale copies that exist out there as well. So let me know as a comment below, what do you prefer to collect? Do you go after like the black label GameCube games? Do you care if they're player's choice? Sometimes it's advantageous to get a player's choice. It might actually have a little bit more involved. So let me know. Also, feel free to subscribe to the channel. I post videos usually on Sundays and Wednesdays at 10 a.m. Eastern Time, and then some other videos randomly throughout the week. So Mario Sunshine is a great Kickstarter point for this video, because look at how many different variations I have in my collection of these. Now, the for display only, that one does not have an actual disc inside or a manual. That one is just from a store, but the other three variations do have this. Now, what sparked this entire conversation for me personally was because I was after this game right here, Paper Mario: The Thousand Year Door, to me the best in the series. This game is the black label North American release. This is only 4 in the top left-hand corner, so it's not the Canadian release, and it is entirely black label. There is no player's choice, there is no greatest hits or best seller option on this. So I found this locally, which is a great pickup. It didn't come on its own though. It also came with 2 other games, so the Sonic Adventure games. This is Sonic Adventure 1 and 2, also black label in really good condition. So all 3 of these I got together for around $120 US. That's a really good deal considering Paper Mario in this variation right here probably sells for more than that on its own. I would say Sonic Adventure is probably around $25 to $30, maybe a little bit more. And then Sonic Adventure 2 is probably like $20 more than that. Overall, I think I'm not quite doubling my investment on these games, but I was really after these variations. Now, first of all, Paper Mario: The Thousand Year Door, I had a few copies of this already in my collection. This is true. I had the original copy from my childhood right here, but it has both the French and the English in the top left-hand corner, and it has this giant bestseller sticker on it. Then there is my wife's copy right here, same thing with the top left-hand corner, but below it has a different bestseller sticker. You can see that right there. There's actually a few other variations of this where the sticker's in the bottom right-hand corner. There's also one that is player's choice, yellow at the top. So I thought this game is one of my favorites of all time. I would love to have the original print run of this game, and when I found it locally, I was really excited to try and pick that up. A lot of you are also asking me, by the way, where do you find pickups such as this? I search on places like Facebook Marketplace, on Instagram, on eBay, or Kijiji or Mercari in the United States. Anything basically that might have ads being posted for games, I try and search on there. If you're wondering, why did Player's Choice, or now Nintendo Selects, why did that ever become a thing whatsoever? I think it was just a few different things from Nintendo's perspective. Number one, it was a way to reintroduce older games to new audiences to try and sell more copies. Number two, it was a way of finally having a price drop on Nintendo games. Most of the Nintendo Selects versions of games went down to $20 in the United States, way down from $50 released originally. If you collect Nintendo, you know Nintendo almost never puts a price drop in a lot of their games. That's why there probably isn't that many games that do have a drop. And number three, it's a way of telling people that, hey, these games are probably pretty good, they sold really well, a lot of people like them. But what does it mean for the actual value of the game? Well, for something like Super Mario 64, it actually does change today. The original copy of the game is just over $100 now, complete in box, more if it's in really good shape, but the Player's Choice variation is probably about 20 to 30% less than that. So collectors, it does matter to a lot of people, but not always. Something like Animal Crossing on the Nintendo GameCube, it seems like it's way more important if it comes complete with the memory card with all the instructions and a disc that works in really good condition, and then there's not that much of a difference in price. So it's not always the exact same kind of rule for all, that it's going to be a price drop of 30% roughly if you're buying the Player's Choice variation. For sealed games, though, again, the older the game, the more important this rule is, but there are some examples which are drastically different for sealed copies of games. Right here is Super Mario Galaxy 2. The original release copy of the game right now, factory sealed, is going for about $180. But you can find copies of the Nintendo Selects variation still factory sealed, not the UAE version, the regular release here for the Nintendo Selects. That one's going for around $60 to $75. So it's more than double to get the original print run for factory sealed games. Definitely something to take into consideration when you're collecting sealed copy of games. If you're into that sort of thing, you definitely want to try and get the original print run. I think that's the one that's more highly desirable, and it's going to go up eventually over time. One of the first things might just be preference. So when you're looking on your shelf, this is an example of 6 games that are the player's choice variations for the Nintendo GameCube with that yellow bottom part with the logo. And here are the exact same 6 games as Black Label. You can imagine this on your shelf, maybe driving some people a little bit crazy if they do look inconsistent. I like the way games look on the shelf as long as they're consistent as much as possible. Scott DeWaz did do a great video about this that you can also check out about player's choice games and variations. So I prefer the ones on the right, especially considering not every game obviously gets this treatment, but there are some collectors that try and get every single variation of a player's choice for a system, especially we can see them very visibly when they're on your shelf. Let me know what you guys prefer, because I prefer something like the Black Label variations for these. GameCube is not the only system to do this though, so let's go back in time all the way back. Now, first of all, on the Nintendo Entertainment System, there was the Classic series. Some of the games were like basically given reprints, but from my understanding, I don't think there's anything like Player's Choice quite like it on the original Nintendo Entertainment System. Please correct me if I'm wrong, but I do think some of the games did have like a reprint. So first of all, let's take a look at Super Nintendo. The Super Nintendo is, I think, where this became a lot more popular. Games started selling in the millions, and they started to be called Player's Choice. So if we're looking at the Donkey Kong trilogy, you got Donkey Kong 1, then you get Donkey Kong 2, and then all of a sudden for Donkey Kong 3, we have this giant Player's Choice Nintendo million seller on it. Now I have this inconsistent thing in my collection. I am still after a copy of Donkey Kong Country 3 in the box that does not have that on it. It just kind of ruins it for me personally with what my collection looks like overall, just as the appeal. It doesn't change the gameplay, it doesn't change the fact that I have it complete in box, and to some people that's all that matters. And when I started collecting, that's all I really wanted. I wanted to get it complete in box. When I could find it, especially in person, I was just so happy and excited to pick it up. But now that I'm more of a completionist and I've had a little bit more time, when I have these games on my shelf, you can even see the inconsistency with the little red tab here, and then it's gold once it gets to Donkey Kong Country 3, which is just something that I would like to correct slowly but surely. This happened very frequently, so here we have my only copy of Super Mario Kart. Same thing, it has that Player's Choice with the gold on the side. And when I'm displaying all these games on my shelf, of course, the gold kind of really stands out. There is something else that I want to mention that exists for Super Nintendo boxes. Not everyone is aware of this, but this is a for-display only copy of Super Mario World. You can find these on eBay. There's roughly 20 games or so that had the for-display only box. They are usually authentic boxes that stores would use to display the games to get people interested in buying the items, but they did not come with a manual or the game itself. Super Mario World in particular, the box for this guy is so expensive, hundreds of dollars just for the cardboard box. So this is something that I've had for a really long time. I got this copy of this box with other boxes, like even Earthbound in a smaller variation of the box that does say for display only. So if you look back to my room tour, this is the box that I have on display. I actually still don't own that original Super Mario World box. Be aware that these exist. Most of them are authentic, and they're not actually that expensive. So like this right here is a lot less expensive than getting the actual Super Mario World box. Let me know what your thoughts are on these. I think they're pretty cool. They're collectible, but only to a very niche set of collectors. Following the Super Nintendo, but sticking with home consoles, there is the Nintendo 64. This is the original release of Super Mario 64, only for the Nintendo 64, but the one that I had for a really long time right here is the Player's Choice Million Seller with that gold emboss in the top right-hand corner once again. So this year and last year, I actually started really going after copies of the games that are the original releases. If you're trying to find one overall, it's a lot easier generally to find the million seller. I think a lot of collectors probably keep these in their collections for a longer period of time. The original releases anyways, a lot of gamers like those variations. So I don't know which is actually more common and which one's sold more. You can let me know what your thoughts are, but I am not really sure. I think it completely depends on the game. Again, this is a really common thing that happened with the N64. Not only is it the case with something like Super Mario 64, but also with Mario Kart. Right there, I happen to have both variations. Right now, I'm also inclined to kind of keep both variations in my collection. I think a few room tours ago, someone commented, like, if you were a real collector, you would have had all the different variations of Metroid Prime by now. I don't think that's a very good way of looking at things, but eventually now, because I can find some of them, I am actually starting to collect those variations, and I'm not sure if I want to keep them in my collection overall for a really long period of time. The prices are just going up for all of them, so I'm kind of inclined just to keep them both for now anyways, but we'll see how long I decide to do that. My next example is for GoldenEye on the N64. Same thing, only in the last 6 months was I able to pick up the original release. I'm definitely more after finding it complete in box, if anything. And even something like this has a slight change in the packaging. Look at how this one kind of really emphasizes the Rumble Pack, but this one kind of got rid of it, and it even says 1998 to 97-98 Game of the Year. I think a few games might have to argue with that, like Ocarina of Time. But anyways, speaking of Ocarina of Time, which is next actually for my example, there are a few different box variations that I'm fortunate to have in my collection. There is the standard release right here, only for Nintendo 64, but then we have the Player's Choice version, which is mainly what this video is all about. However, I just want to make sure everyone's aware, and most people are, there's also the Collector's Edition Gold Cartridge Box variation. So if you are really after a lot of these games, you need to be aware of all the different variations. The one on the right, the Collector's Edition, that is worth nearly double what the other two are worth. So it goes in order of value. Collector's Edition, then the regular release, and then the million seller Player's Choice variation. Also, the box looks so much cooler on that gold kind of embossed thing. But honestly, having it complete in box is always just fantastic, just in general. And it's crazy how prices have really gotten away from people over time. So those are my examples from the Nintendo 64. Next up with the Nintendo GameCube, already discussed in this video, you have both releases, at least two different for the Player's Choice. Some of the Player's Choice are also from Canada because they have both text variations in here for the French and English, even across the Player's Choice. But honestly, these both have the exact same inserts. You have the manual, some inserts, it even comes with the memory card, but the Player's Choice has the exact same situation. This one just has a little bit of font someone wrote on my... Oh, that's kind of unfortunate that someone wrote on the memory card, but I can't get anything around that. So we've been over these already. They look really ugly when you compare the two together, but there are some other variations that you need to be aware about for collecting GameCube games. For example, Mario Kart, you have the original release, but then you have something that is a bonus special edition with a whole different cover inside. So the original copy only had one game inside, but the bonus one has an entirely different bonus disc in it. There are a lot of games, not a lot, but there are several games that have two different discs for the game itself on the Nintendo GameCube. Baten Kaitos Origins comes to mind, and various other games as well. There's also the Legend of Zelda Wind Waker and the Metroid Prime double disc that a lot of people just print their own cover because honestly, the manuals and everything else inside are the exact same. I am completely against printing my own covers for any of this stuff. I want the authentic copies. Be really careful when you're buying these. Maybe have one that you can compare it to that's real, especially for the size of the cover art. You can always take out the cover art and make sure that's the exact same size, the exact same kind of paper, the exact same style font for everything, just to make sure you are getting the right one. And there are a ton of different variations of games on the Nintendo GameCube, especially, like I said, Metroid Prime with all these other different sticker variations. Super Smash Bros., I only have the bestseller version. I still want to get that original release, but GameCube, tons of different things to collect and tons of ways to collect for the Nintendo GameCube games. The next home console, of course, is the Nintendo Wii. So the Nintendo Wii changed things around a little bit. We moved from just having the original release, and instead of having Player's Choice with the million seller, now we had something called Nintendo Selects. So the same game was re-released, but now on the cover, it has this red border around it generally. It does have the Nintendo Selects logo, and then on the side of the game, you can see an additional logo added right there to it as well. It doesn't look as terrible on the side, but anything kind of with that crown with the gold, you can tell that it's a Nintendo Selects version. In terms of collecting these, again, you can find both copies pretty regularly, but the factory sealed copies of the original games are always worth more as well. So that's it for Super Mario Galaxy. Super Mario Galaxy 2 is something that I actually do have factory sealed variations of both of them, which is kind of nice to have in my collection, but definitely the original release is worth almost double what the other one is worth. And then if we get into The Legend of Zelda, I have a few examples for these. So I do have Twilight Princess right here, the original and the Nintendo Selects version. I can buy or find a copy of the Twilight Princess pretty frequently, and it's not that expensive for some reason on the Nintendo Wii. On the GameCube, Twilight Princess is way more expensive, and even something like the Twilight Princess HD is getting more expensive. This is the easiest, cheapest way to collect Twilight Princess right now, by the way, especially the Nintendo Selects version. It's probably like 20 bucks when it's complete in box, but it's nearing 100 on the GameCube and on other systems. So then there's something else that I need to talk about, whereas some games for the Nintendo Wii were never released in any other way other than the Nintendo Selects variation. So here we have the new play control for Pikmin. These are games that are ported over from the GameCube onto the Nintendo Wii. So we do have the Nintendo Selects variation of Pikmin 2, and from my understanding, I don't think that game was released in any other way in North America. When it finally made it out here, that's the only way it was printed. You can never find one without the Nintendo Selects logo on it, without that little gold seal kind of on the side. So just be aware, there are some games that never were printed any other way on the Nintendo Wii, and there's a ton of different variations that are out there depending on your region, but Nintendo Selects copies, they're a lot more common right now to find on eBay, especially for factory sealed copies. Just be aware, they're not as desirable as the original print runs of the games. The Wii U also had Nintendo Selects that were released, but I actually don't own a single copy of those games. I was very selective when I've been collecting and playing games on the Wii U. Here are 6 of them, though, that do have Nintendo Select variations that are released. I believe there was 9 of them in North America. So there were these 6, as well as Lego City Undercover. We have Sonic Racing Transformed and Just Dance 2015, I believe. I think there's only 9. Correct me if I'm wrong. And if you're from another region, what other games other than these ones were released as Greatest Choice? Basically the Nintendo Selects variations. So here I do have Wind Waker HD, Super Mario 3D World, Pikmin 3, Nintendo Land, NES Remix Pack, and Donkey Kong Country, Tropical Freeze, as well as those 3 that I had already mentioned. Handheld games from Nintendo got the exact same treatment, so this is the only copy of Link's Awakening that I own on the original Nintendo Game Boy. This one does have that Player's Choice Million Seller sticker stamp right on there. Even back in 1996 in handheld games, they had those variations. Be aware, the better variation is to get it on the Game Boy Color. This is Link's Awakening DX. It does include more coloring, obviously, and also a whole new secret dungeon to the game if you can pick up just that variation, basically. But I'm still after the original Game Boy game, just not that Player's Choice version. On the Game Boy Color and the Game Boy Advance, this stuff continued. So take a look here. I've got Pokemon Leaf Green. The prices for these have gone even crazier than the last video I did, where Pokemon prices are crazy. I'll put a link in the description, or at least in the top right-hand corner as a card to that. So I only have this copy of Pokemon Fire Red as the Player's Choice version. It does not match all the other Pokemon games on my shelf. It's the only one. I am after a box, just the box of this. If anyone happens to have it, I would love to be able to trade one of you guys for it. Feel free to email me on the About tab if you happen to have one of those, by the way, or tweet me at Collect Nintendo. It just kind of ruins the whole look on the entire shelf of all of the games, so yes, I'm looking at replacing that at some time soon. It also looks really weird on the shelf if you have a lot of the games that are being consistent, like I said, back to back to back. So here I have Super Mario Advance. This is not factory sealed. This is just resealed to keep it in really good condition. So that's the first game, which is really confusing because that's Super Mario Bros. 2, which is kind of ridiculous. And then Super Mario World, which is Super Mario Advance 2, also player's choice. Then we had Super Mario World 3 or Super Mario Advance 3. This is Yoshi's Island, which is from the Super Nintendo, a good port of that game. I would rather play it probably on the original console. It's probably just going to fall over. Just put those down. And then after all of those, we have Super Mario Advance 4, which is the original release of the game. So this just looks really weird in my opinion, having all of these as player's choice and then one of them is not player's choice. It's like, do I replace these in my collection? Probably eventually, because I'm like that, and then maybe I just trade off the other variations that are player's choice because I want the original. Just having these on your shelf on display, I don't know why, just kind of ruins it for me overall, even when they're handheld games. This did continue all the way up to something like the Nintendo 3DS with their handheld games. Here I have Luigi's Mansion Dark Moon, good entry into the series. And then we have the Nintendo Selects variation of it, which was a lowered price point. But just be aware that they exist. You can even see that it does have a different symbol on the side of the more modern games, even on the 3DS. So when you're collecting, just be really aware with this, even if it's home console or handheld, that a lot of those variations do exist. I'm personally expecting something like the Nintendo Switch to start getting the Nintendo Selects sometime soon. I would hope that happens maybe this holiday season 2021. I think a lot of the games are old enough that they can maybe take a bit of a price hit, go down maybe $10 or $20 and slap that new logo on them and maybe make more sales from those old games. But honestly, Nintendo games are selling so well. What you do need to be aware of before that maybe happens at some point is there are some slight different variations with games that are released. Anything that's released in sort of a larger pack, like this double pack of the Pokemon games, these ones on the back, they do have a not for resale printed very, very small on them. So if you take a look at them right down here, there's a black line that says not for resale. And if I compare that to one of the original releases of the game, it does not basically have that black line. It says here just basically customer service, as opposed to customer service below a not for resale kind of added one line. It's a really small thing, but if you are getting a box variation of a game, you might want to make sure that you're getting the right version with it that will be a not for resale version. Whenever it's in a box like this on the Nintendo Switch, I really hope we do get the Nintendo Selects. It's just better for prices for a lot of people, and it's just kind of another thing to collect for anyone who's really interested in that. While we're talking about all these different variations of games that exist, there are different color variations of the cases themselves for some Nintendo games. Most people are familiar with New Super Mario Bros. On the Nintendo Wii. This had a cool marketing campaign that had a Nintendo Red different type of case. Eventually, the game was released in a normal case, a normal white case. Other than that, maybe sometimes some of the inserts are different, but you could always just obviously take the stuff out of this and put it into a normal white case. So the white case variation is actually a lot more rare, but it's definitely not more expensive right now because you can probably find it pretty easily and especially just swap out the case or something like that. And a lot of people would probably want the red variation of this. So this wasn't only the only game that Nintendo has done this with. They did it with a lot of DS games, a ton of them. So something like Mario Kart, we have the original version of the black version right here. Then a re-release just got this red case for it right here. I happen to have a factory sealed copy of it. So it's just a different way of marketing the game. I'm not sure what collectors would want really far down the line. My hint and my gut would say that the original copy of the game is going to be more desirable. Whether it's CIB or sealed, I think the original copy release is going to be more, even though this is not a player's choice or greatest hits version or anything like that. So other different color variations that we have that were released. Let's go back to the Nintendo Wii for a second. We also have Mario and Sonic at the London 2012 Olympic Games, coming in a yellow case. I think there's a few other cases for the Nintendo Wii that have different colors. Just let me know if you know of any of the other colors for the Nintendo Wii. Going to the Wii U, we have New Super Luigi Bros, or New Super Luigi U, I should say. This one coming in a green case. It's kind of a quite collectible game for the Wii U right now. It's hard to find it on its own. It was eventually just a pack into New Super Mario Bros, where you got a game that has both variations of it. So this one's kind of a little bit more challenging to pick up. And on the Wii U, of course, you have Mario Kart 8 with that red case that exists. Kind of neat seeing these red cases for Nintendo. They do look a little bit weird kind of on your shelf. And then games like Mario Maker on the 3DS are also released in a red Nintendo case. So even the cases themselves can now change color. It used to be the cardboard box, or a portion of it would change color, but I kind of like it for some of them. I think it's really neat for Luigi's to be green, for Mario Kart to be red, for New Super Mario Bros. To be red, even yellow for something like that. It does look a little strange on your shelf, but it brings more of a story to those sorts of games. Overall, my thoughts on the original release compared to a Player's Choice million seller Nintendo Selects version is I would like the original print run. I think it's more collectible over time. I think it's the one that more people are going to want to find. I think that is going to drive prices up, and a lot of people are probably going to go after the original print runs of games. So from a collecting perspective, that's why I think it makes the most sense to try and go after the original Black Label GameCube games, or the original run games for the Nintendo 64 and the Super Nintendo. For games that are a bit more recent, like the Nintendo Wii, I think it just looks a lot worse on my shelf overall. I would prefer to have the original copy of the game. Factory sealed copies, I mentioned, it probably is more than double the value if you have the original release of the game as opposed to the Nintendo Selects variation. I also am hoping, personally, like I mentioned, that we do get Nintendo Selects for the Switch. Having it at that just a lower price point kind of drives up sales and gets more people playing the games, and in the end, that's what's the most important. Thanks so much for watching this video. I would love to hear your thoughts on Nintendo Selects versus the original releases of games. You guys are the best. Go collect them all, keep smiling while gaming, and stay awesome.